What if you could get away with whatever you want to do, and you knew for a fact that you wouldn't get caught? I mean, personally, I'd love to go down to one of my local surf shops to take a few boards. But I wouldn't do it. Or you might question me on that. You might think, no way, if you could get away with it for sure, you'd be lying if you said that you wouldn't do it. So, is it possible for me to avoid that temptation? Let's consider.
I can't get it off my mind.
Hello, philosophers. I'm Chico. Welcome to the Philosopher Show, where we consider the greatest questions of human history. I have an interesting question for you today, or I should say an interesting story for you today, coming out of Plato, called the Ring of Gyges. It's out of one of his books called The Republic, his most famous book probably. And I'll put a link in the description. You can read it for free actually, but you can also get the book. Anyway, here's how the story goes. A guy, this is story, by the way, in the Republic, it's told by this guy named Glaucon to a guy named Socrates. And Glaucon says, imagine this guy goes into a fissure in the earth, finds a ring that turns him invisible. He goes out and he kills the king, and he usurps the king's power and becomes the king himself. And he says to Socrates, if you had the opportunity, you would do the exact same thing. And if you said you wouldn't, you would be lying. In other words, what he's saying is everybody makes decisions that would benefit them alone. And the only reason we might not do that is because we don't want others to do the same thing to us, right? We wouldn't want anybody else to treat us unjustly or unfairly or anything like that. So he basically says all of our choices are out of self-interest. Now, Socrates has an interesting response. Socrates believes that we shouldn't do that. He says if you were to do so, you would. It's like you'd be no better than an animal. I mean, you'd be just going after your own desires, and that's just what animals do. They don't worry about who this belongs to. They just take stuff, right? If they want the land, they take the land. If they want the woman, they take the woman, right? Three Amigos. I think that's how that quote went. I don't remember. Anyway. So Socrates says that, but what's interesting about that is it doesn't actually address the problem. What Glaucon is claiming, it seems to me, I mean, I'm not an interpreter of Plato by any means, but it seems to me what Glaucon is saying is that this is a matter of fact. This is what humans do, whereas Socrates is saying this is what humans should do. Right now, if we can't not choose for our own benefits, then there's no reason to say that we should choose for somebody else's benefit. Right, so there are three possibilities here. Number one, that humans only choose for their own benefit. Number two, that sometimes we choose ultimately for other people's benefit. And number three, which is one that isn't discussed in this, that possibly we make some choices purely for the sake of duty, purely for the sake we feel an obligation and we do it just for that sake. So if the question is, can we make decisions just purely to benefit somebody else? It sure seems like we can, but maybe that seeming is only an illusion. The most poignant examples that we have are things like people self-sacrificing for altruistic reasons. So imagine a soldier jumping on a hand grenade to stop that from killing all of his comrades, right? You might think, look, here's a soldier who gave up all of his own benefits purely for the sake of others. It was to his detriment that he jumped on that hand grenade. The person that doesn't think that's possible has a couple of responses that he could give. Number one, possibly the soldier actually did that for his own benefit, but it just seems kind of, I don't know, weird to say that. So, for example, maybe the soldier is considering what life would be like, knowing that he allowed all of his friends to die and just can't handle that, and so he jumps on the hand grenade. And that might be a plausible explanation sometimes, but it doesn't seem like that would cover everything. I mean, you probably have experienced something yourself where there wasn't that, oh, how could I deal with this if everybody were gone? It's just that you're directed at somebody else. So although it seems like that could cover some situations, maybe not all. Maybe some soldiers do jump on the grenades for other people, and there's no reason to think that they wouldn't. Okay, a second possible response to this is that maybe these feelings that you have that are other-directed are due to some kind of self-interested, I don't know, story that we can describe that eventually gives rise to these. So, for example, maybe as a kid, you and all your friends were about to get in trouble for something. You step in and say, "Hey, it was me, it wasn't them," and then you get in trouble for it alone. And afterwards, everybody's, "You're the bestest," and singing your praises. That may have developed a desire in you to go out and take one for the team all the time, right? And then ultimately it leads to this decision. The problem with this response is it admits that we have altruistic desires. I mean, it doesn't matter how we got there. What matters is we can have these choices that are for the better of others and not for our own betterment. So this response would in effect just be giving up the whole hypothesis in the first place. So yeah, that was probably the hardest objection to what's called psychological egoism. The idea that we only make decisions based on bettering ourselves or our own interest or something like that. There's a further question on should we make decisions that benefit ourselves versus benefiting others, and that's something that I will be addressing in the next few weeks. After this, by the way, some new cool stuff. Go ahead and check out. I'm gonna have a new channel called The Philosopher's Classroom, where we'll go into this very subject a little bit more in depth, a little bit more academic. So if you want to hear more objections and responses, check that out. Also, later on in the week, check out The Philosopher's World. I'm going to be taking a current event and relating it to this topic, show you how to think about it from a philosopher's perspective. And then finally, check out my blog at thephilosopher.com, which I'll put a link in the description. And that will be, I'm going to put an article up on is this question that I'm asking right now about psychological egoism, is it philosophy or is it science? Who gets to answer that question? So anyway, like I always say, the best philosophy happens in dialogue. So please let me know what you think about this whole idea. Do we make decisions purely for our own benefit, or can we make decisions for other people's benefit, or even purely out of the sense of duty, just for the sake of justice or something like that? Also, should we? What do you think? Do you think we are obliged to make decisions for other people's benefit? Or is it actually, maybe we have a moral obligation to make decisions for ourselves? I don't know. What do you think? Also, please like, subscribe, comment, and tag a friend so they can join the conversation. Adios.